Imagine a phone with 8 speakers. One that flashes bright LED lights like a disco ball. Another that looks exactly like a cigarette pack. A solar-powered one. Or even a phone branded with the Olympic rings. No, this wasn't Apple's wild R&D department gone rogue. This was real, and it happened in China. In the early to mid-2000s, a massive underground movement began sweeping through the mobile phone market. It was chaotic, creative, illegal, and, for a brief moment, unstoppable. It was called the Shanzhai phone revolution. And it changed China's tech landscape forever. Let's rewind to where it all began. In 1992, 4 Chinese university graduates, led by Xu Lihua, noticed that pagers, or beepers, were rising in popularity across the country. Yet nearly all of them were imported. So they started a company to build Chinese-made beepers for Chinese people. They named it Bird, symbolizing freedom and ambition. Backed by funding from a local town government, Bird began producing beepers in 1993. Shortages in Motorola's supply chain gave Bird a window of opportunity. By 1998, they had sold over 325,000 beepers. But then came the real shift: feature phones. The late 1990s saw the decline of pagers and the rise of simple, durable mobile phones, especially in Hong Kong and Korea. Bird sensed the transition and prepared to pivot. But there was a problem. At that time, China's government strictly regulated mobile phone production. You couldn't just build a phone, you needed a license. And between 1998 and 2005, only 35 domestic and 14 foreign manufacturers were granted one. That exclusivity created a massive supply gap. People wanted phones, especially ones from trusted brands like Nokia or Motorola, but those phones were in short supply. This gap was fertile ground for imitators, counterfeiters, and opportunists. To legitimize itself, Bird partnered with a state-owned company to obtain a license. It also struck a deal with French telecom conglomerate Sagem for technology. In 1999, Bird launched the Mirage RC838, a phone built with French components, branded with a name that evoked the fighter jet. The slogan? The fighter jet of mobile phones. It worked. Bird sold 700,000 Mirage units in 2000. They then followed up with dozens of new models, including the popular S-series. Their aggressive marketing included paying for endorsements from stars like Coco Lee even before the product was released. By 2002, Bird had claimed 9.7% of the Chinese market, making it the third largest phone brand in the country, behind only Motorola and Nokia. But while Bird was enjoying its moment, a silent player was about to turn the entire industry upside down. That player was MediaTek. Founded in 1997 as a spin-off from Taiwan's United Microelectronics Corporation, MediaTek, or MTK, was built on a simple but powerful principle: integration. Instead of selling multi-chip solutions like its rivals, MediaTek combined all necessary functions into fewer chips, making devices cheaper, more reliable, and easier to build. Its early success came from dominating the CD-ROM and DVD chipset market. By reducing chip count from 6 to 2 and offering blazing 20x read speeds, MTK captured 60% of the global CD-ROM market and half of the DVD market by the early 2000s. They made their name in optical storage, but they were watching mobile, and they were ready. Around 2001, MTK decided to go after mobile phone chipsets. Their first attempts were underwhelming. The chips were too basic, lacked mobile internet support, and couldn't play media files. In 2004, they sold just over 3 million chips, tiny compared to the 600 million phones sold globally that year. To make matters worse, MTK's core DVD business was declining, and the company was burning cash on R&D. They needed a new strategy. Then came a perfect storm of opportunity. That same year, China dismantled its strict licensing regime for mobile phones, replacing it with a more lenient approval system. This regulatory shift opened the floodgates. Anyone could enter the mobile phone market, if they had the tools. MediaTek responded with something revolutionary, the turnkey model. Instead of just selling chips, MTK sold an entire phone-making kit. It included a fully integrated chipset capable of calls, MP3 playback, and basic imaging. It came bundled with a hardware blueprint, PCB layout, schematics, everything. And it even included an embedded OS layered with MTK's custom UI. All a workshop had to do was add a case, screen, and branding. Overnight, MediaTek had turned anyone with basic technical knowledge into a phone manufacturer. Shenzhen was ready. This southern Chinese tech hub was already full of small workshops, entrepreneurs, ex-factory workers, engineers, all hungry for opportunity. With MTK's kits, these workshops began flooding the market with homemade phones. This was the birth of the Shanzhai era. The word Shanzhai literally means mountain fortress, a reference to rebel strongholds in ancient Chinese folklore. In the 1960s and 70s, it described underground factories in Hong Kong. But in the 2000s, it became synonymous with scrappy, illegal, and wildly innovative phone makers. Shanzhai phones weren't just copies, they were weird, wild, and full of character. There were phones with 3 or 4 SIM slots. Phones shaped like lighters. Phones that looked like Buddhist altars. Phones with telescopic lenses, super loud speakers, and LED panels that pulsed with every ringtone. They weren't just gimmicks. Many solved real problems. Multi-SIM phones helped rural users juggle carrier plans. Loudspeakers were useful in noisy farms or construction sites. Solar chargers helped people without reliable electricity. And perhaps most importantly, they were cheap. Dirt cheap. Sometimes a tenth of the price of a Nokia or Motorola. Thanks to MTK, workshops could turn ideas into finished phones in as little as 2 to 3 months. At one point, as many as 2 or 3 new Shanzhai models were hitting the market every single day. And one woman became a symbol of it all. Her name was Rong Xiuli. Born in 1963 in rural Henan, she studied internal combustion engines and began her career at a government institute. But in 1993, she quit and entered the mobile phone business. First, she resold Samsung and Dopod phones. Then she bought out her boss and his inventory and became one of China's top distributors. In 2002, Rong founded Beijing Tianyu, better known as K-Touch. After struggling initially, she discovered MediaTek's turnkey kits in 2005. With MTK's help, K-Touch began mass-producing affordable phones for rural consumers. She used her existing sales network to push units fast. In 2006, K-Touch sold 10 million phones. In 2007, 17 million. In 2008, 24 million. At its peak, the company held 10% of China's mobile phone market. Rong was celebrated in Chinese media as the Shanzhai Godmother, but success brought ambition and risk. Rong didn't want to stay in the knockoff game. She wanted to go premium. In 2008, K-Touch launched the C800, the first Chinese phone with an 8 megapixels camera and 3x optical zoom. It cost over 2,000 RMB, $287 USD, and was marketed as a flagship. Foreign investors took notice. Warburg Pincus invested $75 million for a 10% stake in K-Touch. Rong was now worth over $500 million. But then came the mistake that doomed her company, and many others. Instead of adopting Android, K-Touch and MediaTek doubled down on Windows Mobile. They thought it was more stable, more mature. But Windows Mobile was clunky and unintuitive. Meanwhile, Android, backed by Google, powered by Qualcomm, was gaining massive traction. By the time MediaTek released Android-compatible chips in 2012, it was too late. The damage was done. K-Touch lost momentum. its experiments with Alibaba's Aliyan OS flopped. Phones like the W700 failed to sell. Layoffs followed. K-Touch faded into obscurity. Today, it sells elderly phones, large fonts, big buttons, long battery life. And K-Touch wasn't alone. By 2010, the entire Shanghai ecosystem was collapsing. The Guangdong government began cracking down on counterfeit phones, citing IP theft and consumer safety. At the same time, telecoms like China Mobile started subsidizing name-brand phones through contracts. This changed everything. Consumers could now get a reliable, fully supported smartphone, often with better features, at the same price as a sketchy Shanzhai device. ZTE, Coolpad, and Huawei capitalized on this. Then, in 2011, Xiaomi entered the game. With the release of the Xiaomi Mi 1, priced at just 1,999 RMB, China had its first high-quality, affordable smartphone, designed in China, for China. It ran Android, had a sleek UI, and a powerful Qualcomm chip. There was no reason to buy a Shanzhai phone anymore. Their key selling points, price and accessibility, had been crushed. The market vanished. Some players like Transsion moved to Africa, where demand for ultra-cheap phones remains. But most disappeared entirely. It's easy to look back at Shanzhai with nostalgia. The chaos, the creativity, the renegade spirit. But behind the flashing lights and multi-SIM slots was a deeper story. One of broken rules, legal gray zones, and short-term thinking. Most Shanzhai makers never invested in R&D. They had no supply chain control, no software strategy, and no long-term brand equity. They were, in the words of one analyst, dead-end mutations in the evolution of Chinese tech. MediaTek, on the other hand, thrived. Like Intel and Microsoft in the PC era, MTK captured nearly all the value. Their integrated chipsets became the foundation of an entire ecosystem. By democratizing phone production, they enabled a generation of innovators. But they also ensured that most of the profits stayed with them. The handset makers were disposable, replaceable, forgettable. And yet, for a brief, glittering moment, Shanzhai phones were everywhere. In factories, on farms, at street markets. They brought mobile technology to millions of people who couldn't afford a Nokia. They solved local problems in quirky, often hilarious ways. And they reminded the world that innovation doesn't always come from billion-dollar labs. Sometimes, it comes from a cluttered workshop in Shenzhen with nothing but soldering irons, plastic shells, and a dream. The Shanzhai phone era is over. But its legacy lives on, in the affordable smartphones we carry, the rapid product cycles we expect, and the scrappy DIY spirit that still defines parts of China's tech industry today. It wasn't legal. It wasn't sustainable. But it was brilliant, reckless, and uniquely Chinese. And it all started with a chip and a mountain fortress.